Before we begin today's story, make sure to hit that like button, subscribe, and let me know in the comments what apex creature you would want guarding your back in an alien forest. Would you choose a bear, a dire wolf, or something far darker? Now let's dive in. Sergeant Marcus Kane crouched low behind the jagged blue ice boulders, his breath curling into mist that froze on his beard. The pale dawn of Vorik Prime seeped across the tundra, washing the snow-laden pines and stone towers in a wan glow. His pulse rifle hummed softly in his grip, the battery heat warming his palm through armored gloves. For a moment, everything was silent but for the wind sighing through crystalline branches. He scanned the distant treeline through his cracked visor. Movement. A ripple of refracted light. His heart drummed against his ribs, steady but furious. Karlach's hunters. They were always out there, shifting in and out of active camouflage, their laughter crackling across encrypted channels that they knew humans could intercept. Tiny prey. Fragile bones. Don't run too fast, little human. We want your skin intact. Their words rasped with alien accent, but the mocking tone was universal. Marcus clenched his jaw, resisting the urge to fire blindly. They would never give him a clean shot. He had learned that weeks ago when his unit was first deployed to Vorik Prime. Recon and sabotage, they called it. An easy op, they said, just locate enemy outposts and call in orbital strikes. But the Karlachs had been ready. They were not primitive reptilians with ceremonial bone armor as Intel described. They were evolved apex hunters with plasma net launchers, grav boomerangs, and stealth drones that whispered overhead unseen. His squad was cut down in the first ambush, Lieutenant Harris's blood freezing in bright red arcs across the snow. He could still hear Corporal Jaden's screams as the plasma net seared his flesh to the bone. Marcus alone escaped into the glacial forests, dragging supplies with numb hands, building traps, scavenging energy cells from downed drones. Weeks blurred into a silent routine of survival, constant tension binding his shoulders like steel cable. The Karlachs never stopped hunting him. Sometimes they spoke to him in his sleep, their broadcasts cutting into the audio feed of his cracked helmet, promising his skull would decorate their great hall, that his death would feed their hatchlings for a season. He learned not to flinch at their words. Fear was an indulgence that cost energy. Anger kept his limbs moving when frostbite gnawed his fingers to gray. Today they were closer than ever. He could hear faint vibrations underfoot, the low thrum of hover blinds moving into position. Marcus exhaled, scanning for escape routes. Back to the frozen ravine, down toward the sulfur pools where sensors glitched in geothermal interference. But he wouldn't make it in time. They were corralling him like a wounded snow hare. He knew their tactics now: sweep, tighten, net, claim. A slow suffocation of hope. He flexed his grip on the rifle. If today was the end, then he would carve a memory into them. Make them bleed. Make them remember that prey can still tear out a hunter's throat. A faint vibration ran through the ice beneath him. Heavy. Rhythmic. Marcus stiffened. That was not a Karlach's hover signature. That was footsteps. Enormous ones. Branches cracked in the distance. A plume of frost billowed skyward as something massive exhaled. Marcus felt warmth blossom across his chest, a fleeting ember of relief cutting through the frozen terror. He ducked lower, switching his visor overlay to thermal mode despite the glitching lines of static. There it was, a hulking silhouette moving between pines, body heat flaring in amber gold. The creature paused, sniffing the air with a broad muzzle. Barks. Marcus felt his pulse slow for the first time in days. His war bear was near. The Karlachs hadn't seen it yet. They were too focused on him, voices crackling with anticipation as they closed their circle. One alien dropped his stealth field, revealing dark crimson-scaled armor embossed with bone trophies and etched glyphs of his clan. His snout curled back in a sneer, revealing dagger teeth. Marcus recognized him, High Hunter Vorsk. The same one who tore open Lieutenant Harris's chest plate and lifted his heart as a trophy. Vorsk's deep voice rumbled through the trees, amplified by external vox. You have run long enough, human. Lay down your weapon. Kneel and your death will be quick. Resist and your death will be illuminating. Marcus shifted his stance, tilting the rifle muzzle upward to cover the alien's throat. Come find out. Vorsk let out a harsh barking laugh, echoed by the hidden Karlachs around them. Brave words for a dying creature. You stand alone. Another vibration thrummed through the frozen earth, shaking ice dust from the pine branches. Marcus heard it more clearly now, each step a deep, ground-shaking pulse. The rhythmic thump of massive paws spread wide to distribute weight across snowfields. A guttural growl rolled through the forest like distant thunder, setting flocks of sharp-winged raptors screeching into the sky. Vorsk's slit-pupil eyes narrowed, head tilting. What is? The pines exploded outward as Vorax emerged. The war bear towered over every tree around it. Its thick obsidian-brown fur shimmered with frost and crystalline dust. Massive shoulders rippled with dense muscle, armored plating strapped across its chest and flanks, hammered from salvaged human vehicle hulls and Karlax alloy plates. Blue thermal lines pulsed under its fur, feeding power to embedded exoharnesses enhancing its natural strength. Its broad head swung side to side, jaws parting to reveal curved ivory fangs thicker than Marcus's wrist. Vorax's eyes, glowing pale sapphire, fixed on Marcus for a fraction of a second. Recognition. Reassurance. Then it shifted forward, positioning its colossal frame directly between Marcus and the alien hunters. Silence fell. For the first time since arriving on Vorak Prime, Marcus heard no alien laughter. Only quiet, trembling breaths and the distant hiss of frost winds snaking through shattered trees. Vorax's growl rose from its chest, reverberating through the clearing with a feral resonant power that sent chills racing down Marcus's spine despite the warmth of relief blooming in his chest. Vorsk stepped back involuntarily, his plasma lance lowering. What is this creature? How is it armored? How does it obey you? Marcus raised his visor, exposing his frostbitten face to the frigid air. He looked up at Vorax, towering over him like a living fortress of claw and steel and fury. A small smile cracked his chapped lips. He rested his gloved hand against the bear's massive foreleg, feeling the faint vibration of its growl deep in his bones. He's not my pet, Marcus said quietly, though his voice carried across the silent clearing. He's my brother. Vorax shifted its bulk, claws crunching through layers of ice as it settled into a defensive stance. Steam vented from exoharness ports along its shoulders, curling around Marcus like protective smoke. The glow of its eyes brightened, sapphire irises contracting to needlepoints as it locked onto the nearest Karlax. Marcus took a steadying breath, feeling resolve steel his exhausted limbs. The hunters thought they were predators, masters of the tundra, apex among lesser prey. But standing here in Vorax's shadow, shielded by fur and armor and ancient primal wrath, Marcus saw fear slither across their reptilian faces. And in that moment he knew something they did not. Today the hunted would not die. Today the hunted would teach the hunters what it truly meant to be prey. The Karlax stood frozen, their camouflaged outlines flickering as fear broke their neural focus. Vorax lowered his massive head, nostrils flaring as he sampled their scent. Frost steamed from his fur, exoharness vents releasing quiet pulses of heat to keep his thick armored plates from freezing solid in the tundra winds. Marcus felt his pulse steady, as though Vorax's presence anchored him to the living world. Memories of how this bond formed flickered behind his eyes, unbidden yet grounding him in purpose. When the mission first collapsed, when Lieutenant Harris's lifeless body lay bleeding out into the snow and Corporal Jaden's screams went silent in the burning dropship wreckage, Marcus had been the one to drag away what remained of their supplies. 2 days later, while scavenging through alien research ruins deep within the northern canyons, he found Vorax. The war bear had been caged within a reinforced plasma enclosure, its massive body crisscrossed with restraint cables sunk into its flesh. Burn marks and old healed scars laced its chest and forelegs where shock lances had conditioned it into submission. Karlax data slates scattered nearby documented generations of genetic engineering, crossing Terran Kodiak DNA with something alien, something from the deeper asteroid jungles beyond settled systems. They designed it as an arena spectacle, a weaponized apex bred only for entertainment and slaughter. Marcus remembered standing outside the enclosure, half dead with exhaustion, pointing his pulse rifle at the bear's enormous skull. Vorax had watched him silently with unfathomable pale blue eyes. There was no rage or fear. Only a dull emptiness that spoke of endless suffering. Marcus saw something of himself in that empty gaze. Trapped, used, denied the dignity of a final stand. He had lowered his rifle. It took 2 days of work to breach the plasma cage without detonating the neural failsafes implanted along the creature's spine. He sabotaged the alien generators with repurposed demolition charges from his dead squad mates, cutting power with a thunderous blast that rattled the canyon walls. When the shields fell, Vorax remained still, as though too broken to realize freedom waited beyond the glowing bars. Marcus tossed the bear half his remaining ration bricks. It sniffed, lifted its giant paw, and carefully scraped the food closer before swallowing it in one silent gulp. Only then did it stand. Its towering silhouette blotted out the canyon light, fur burned and ragged, eyes fixed on Marcus with an intelligence that rooted him in place. He raised his empty hands, unsure if he was welcoming a companion or offering his life. Vorax stepped out of the cage and lowered its head, sniffing his chest, his hair, the sweat-soaked rags of his uniform. Marcus had whispered, "You're free now. I'm not your enemy." The bear rumbled deep in its chest, a low sound vibrating his bones, then turned and lumbered away into the snow-swept canyon. He thought he would never see it again. But that night, as a blizzard howled across his makeshift thermal tarp shelter, Vorax returned. It carried the carcass of a sulfur-ridged snow hare in its jaws and dropped it before Marcus's feet. From that moment they shared every meal, every silence, and every hunt. Now, in the frozen forest clearing, Vorax shifted forward, claws biting into the ice as it positioned itself to block Marcus from the Karlach's plasma net launchers. The massive bear's harnessed plating rattled slightly with each exhalation. Steam curled from its nostrils, catching pale sunlight in drifting halos. Its eyes tracked every flicker of movement among the hunters, calculating threats with feral focus. High Hunter Vorsk regained his composure, shaking his head as though to clear away instinctive dread. His clawed hand gestured, and 3 of his warriors stepped forward, activating shock javelins that crackled with bright arcs of violet energy. Their stealth fields dropped, revealing thick armored forms, scaled tails swaying behind them as they spread into an attack line. "Kill the creature," Vorsk hissed, baring his curved teeth. "Bring me the human alive." Marcus tightened his grip on the rifle. "You're welcome to try." The first Karlach's warrior lunged with a shriek, javelin thrusting forward in a blur of violet light. Vorax swatted him aside with one massive forepaw, the impact snapping bone and hurling the alien into a tree trunk with a sickening crunch. The other 2 spread out, attempting to flank the war bear. One leapt onto Vorax's back, stabbing the shock javelin between armored plates. Vorax roared, a thunderous, ear-splitting sound that shook snow from branches overhead. He twisted violently, his plated shoulder smashing the attacker against a pine trunk, splitting wood and alien armor alike. Marcus tracked the 3rd attacker through his scope. The Karlach darted left, then rolled across the ice with predatory grace, aiming his javelin at Vorax's underbelly. Marcus exhaled and squeezed the trigger. His pulse rifle spat a precise bolt that pierced the alien's throat, dropping it instantly. Steam hissed from the smoking wound as blood spread across the ice in a black-purple pool. Vorsk snarled in fury, his crest flaring wide with bioluminescent threat displays. "You dare damage my warriors, human? That creature will fall. You will watch it die." Vorax growled low, the sound vibrating through Marcus's chest like distant artillery fire. The bear's massive head turned slightly, sapphire eyes meeting Marcus's for a fleeting heartbeat. There was no fear there, only silent resolve. Marcus felt something tighten in his chest, an unspoken promise blooming between them like fire in winter darkness. The war bear lowered its head and charged. Ice cracked beneath its claws as Vorax barreled forward, armored plates clanging against the impact tremors. Vorsk raised his plasma lance, aiming for Vorax's exposed throat. But the bear twisted with uncanny agility, slamming its plated shoulder into the alien leader and sending him skidding back across the clearing. Snow billowed in glittering clouds around them. Another trio of Karlach's hunters uncloaked behind Marcus, plasma net launchers primed and ready. Marcus spun, firing a short burst that dropped the first instantly. The second launched a net as he dived aside, but Vorax pivoted, sweeping the glowing mesh aside with a claw strike that left the alien reeling backward. The third fired at Vorax's flank, but the net tangled in the bear's armored plates, failing to penetrate to flesh. Marcus reloaded with smooth, practiced motions, his hands moving on autopilot despite the adrenaline pulsing through every vein. Beside him, Vorax ripped the net free with a savage twist, metal strands snapping like thread. The bear let out a furious roar, fogging the air with frozen breath, then charged at the third hunter, jaws parting wide. Its fangs closed around the alien's chest and crushed his armored torso like brittle shell, blood spraying in an arc of black mist across the snow. Silence fell again, broken only by Vorax's labored breathing. Steam rose from its fur where plasma bolts had scorched superficial burns into its shoulder and flank. The bear shifted closer to Marcus, pressing its massive head gently against his chest in a fleeting gesture of reassurance. Marcus raised a trembling hand to stroke the thick fur between armored plates, feeling the beast's warmth seep into his frozen fingers. Across the clearing, Vorsk climbed to his feet, his crimson armor dented, eyes blazing with murderous rage. He raised his plasma lance high, the weapon's emitter charging with a shrill whine. "This ends now," he snarled. "Your creature dies and your blood will freeze screaming into the ice." Marcus felt a flicker of exhausted despair at the sight of Vorax's wounds, but it died swiftly. In its place rose a furious, defiant certainty that burned away doubt. He stepped forward, placing himself beside Vorax's great shoulder, pulse rifle raised in unison with the bear's deadly claws. Vorax lowered its head, its massive frame coiling with savage potential energy. Marcus could feel its muscles vibrating through the frozen ground. Together they watched Vorsk advance, plasma lance glowing like a captured star in his claws. Marcus tightened his grip, the bitter wind tearing at his exposed skin as he steadied his aim. He met Vorax's gaze one final time, silent words unspoken between them. No retreat. No surrender. If this was their last stand, then they would make the galaxy remember. Vorax's growl deepened into a rumble that set Marcus's heart hammering in sync. As Vorsk roared his war cry and charged, the bear's sapphire eyes blazed bright, and Marcus felt the world narrow to a single moment of crystalline clarity before impact. The moment Vorsk lunged, time fractured into shards of violence and instinct. His plasma lance crackled with blinding violet energy, illuminating his snarling reptilian face as he closed the final distance. Marcus fired 2 quick shots, but Vorsk twisted with unnerving speed, the bolt sparking off his scaled crimson armor. The alien's clawed feet slammed into the snow with thunderous force as he thrust the lance forward, aiming directly for Marcus's chest. Vorax surged ahead in a blur of muscle and armored fury. The bear's massive forepaw swept upward, knocking the lance sideways just before it struck home. The plasma bolt discharged harmlessly into the frozen sky, its residual energy crackling across the upper branches. Vorax's claws tore through Vorsk's shoulder plating, rending metal and scale in a spray of black blood. The alien screamed, his voice a distorted rasp of rage and pain. But Vorsk did not fall. His powerful tail lashed out, striking Vorax across the snout with a wet, meaty crack that echoed across the clearing. The impact rocked the bear back a step, steam gouting from its nostrils as it shook off the blow. Vorsk pivoted with fluid predatory grace, slamming the butt of his lance into Vorax's flank, denting the armored plate and sending arcs of plasma energy coursing along its side. Vorax roared, the sound rising into a feral bellow that rattled Marcus's ribcage and sent a primal chill down his spine. Marcus knew he could not stand idle. He shifted to Vorsk's exposed flank, firing a precise 3-shot burst into the gaps between armor plates. The plasma bolts punched through scale and flesh, eliciting another howl from the alien. Vorsk whirled, his tail sweeping out again, forcing Marcus to dive sideways into the snow. He felt the rush of air as the serrated tail blades passed inches from his face. Vorax lunged, jaws wide, and clamped down on Vorsk's forearm. The alien screeched, claws scrabbling at the bear's armored snout, plasma lance flickering as it tried to focus a discharge at point-blank range. But Vorax twisted, wrenching Vorsk sideways and slamming him into the frozen ground with bone-crushing force. Snow exploded outward in a halo of white. For a moment Marcus thought the fight was over. But Vorsk's lance flared again, discharging a focused plasma bolt into Vorax's shoulder at full power. The beam burned through fur and armor plating, searing deep into flesh with a sound like sizzling meat. Vorax roared in agony, releasing his grip and staggering backward. The scent of burned hair and blood hit Marcus in a nauseating wave. Vorsk rose from the crater, panting heavily. His crimson armor was dented and scorched, one arm hanging limp from the bear's bite, black blood dripping steadily onto the ice. His eyes burned with savage triumph as he lifted the lance in his uninjured arm, leveling it at Vorax's broad chest. "Die, beast!" Vorsk rasped, voice trembling with pain and anticipation. Vorax stood trembling, his massive frame shuddering as blood dripped onto the snow in dark rivulets. Steam rose from the plasma burn that had pierced his armored shoulder, mingling with the fog of his ragged breath. His pale sapphire eyes locked onto Vorsk with unwavering hatred. Marcus could see the bear's limbs twitching, muscles tightening as though ready to charge again, but the wound smoked with heat, flesh seared black around the molten edge of the armor breach. Marcus scrambled to his feet, adrenaline burning away the ache in his frozen limbs. He raised his rifle, but Vorsk shifted slightly, using Vorax's bulk as cover, his narrowed eyes gleaming with cruel calculation. "Shoot," Vorsk hissed, "and your beast dies faster." Marcus's hands trembled on the rifle grip. He could hear Vorax's labored breathing, each rumbling inhale rattling like distant thunder weakened by storm winds. Their eyes met. In that silent exchange, Marcus read something that twisted his gut with anguish. Acceptance. Resolve. A single promise burned behind Voryx's sapphire gaze: protect. Vorsk stepped forward, charging his lance for a final strike aimed at Marcus. The violet glow built to an incandescent flare, sparks dancing along the weapon's shaft as it screamed with gathering energy. Marcus tried to move, tried to find an angle, but Vorsk adjusted with precise predator's grace. The alien's eyes locked onto Marcus's chest, unblinking. As the plasma discharge screamed into release, Voryx moved. The bear's massive frame surged forward, interposing itself fully between Marcus and Vorsk. The plasma bolt struck its chest with a thunderous impact, slamming the bear back a full step as steam and burned fur exploded outward in a scalding cloud. The smell was horrifying: charred meat, molten armor plating, ionized blood. Voryx let out a choked roar, the sound cracking into a whimper at the end, something Marcus had never heard from him before. His knees buckled slightly as his front legs splayed for balance. Steam hissed from the burned hole in his chest plate, and blood gushed freely beneath it, dripping in heavy rivulets onto the trampled snow. Marcus screamed, a raw, broken sound torn from his throat. No. Vorsk bared his teeth in a savage grin, advancing with confident strides now, his limp arm dragging behind him. Your protector falls. Now you die alone, human. But Voryx raised his head again, unsteady but unbowed. His deep rumble built into a roar that resonated across the clearing, echoing off the distant frozen cliffs in waves of primal fury. The ground seemed to vibrate under Marcus's feet as the war bear planted his claws deep into the ice, his massive frame rising to its full towering height despite the plasma wound gaping in his chest armor. Marcus felt something shatter inside him, replaced by burning clarity. He was done being prey. He was done watching those he cared for suffer while he cowered in the shadows. Roaring his own defiance, he stepped forward to stand beside Voryx, his rifle raised, eyes locked on Vorsk with murderous focus. The Karlak's leader hesitated, just a flicker, as if startled by the sudden unity of human and beast in mutual fury. That moment was all Marcus needed. He squeezed the trigger, sending a precise bolt directly into Vorsk's eye. The plasma round burned through scale and bone, bursting out the back of his skull in a mist of charred tissue. Vorsk crumpled without a sound, the plasma lance falling from his grip and skidding across the ice. Silence descended like a suffocating shroud. The remaining Karlak's hunters, hidden among the trees and rocks, watched their leader fall with wide, unblinking eyes. One by one they flickered out of camouflage, revealing their trembling forms as they dropped their weapons in the snow. Voryx's labored breathing rasped behind Marcus. He turned to find the bear swaying unsteadily, blood pooling beneath his massive paws. The sapphire glow of his eyes had dimmed to a faint gleam, but they still focused on Marcus with unwavering affection. The bear lowered his great head, pressing his snout gently against Marcus's chest. The contact was warm despite the blood-slicked fur. Marcus pressed his forehead against Voryx's armored brow, tears freezing on his lashes as he whispered, "Stay with me, brother. Stay with me." Voryx's only answer was a rumbling exhale, warm against Marcus's chest, before his massive frame sagged and he slumped heavily to his haunches. The bear sat in silence, staring ahead with ragged breaths misting in the cold morning air. The Karlak's hunters began to back away, retreating into the trees with cautious steps, dragging their dead and wounded behind them. None dared meet Marcus's gaze. None dared challenge the war bear again. Marcus kept his rifle raised until they vanished into the snow-clad forest. Only then did he sink to his knees beside Voryx, resting his head against the bear's armored flank. The silence that followed was almost comforting. It was the silence of survival. Of victory. But as he listened to Voryx's shallow, trembling breaths and watched blood drip steadily into the snow, dread gnawed at the edges of his resolve. This was not over. The Karlaks would return with reinforcements. The war bear needed medical treatment beyond his skills and field dressings. If Marcus didn't move soon, Voryx's sacrifice would be in vain. He wiped frozen tears from his cheeks and rose, placing a hand on the bear's massive shoulder. "We're not done yet," he whispered. "You hear me? You're coming with me. I don't care what it takes." Voryx's dim sapphire gaze flickered to meet his. The bear rumbled softly, too weak for words but strong enough to stand if only for him. Marcus took a trembling breath, tightening his grip on his rifle. Together they turned toward the jagged peaks on the horizon, where he knew a hidden human outpost lay within reach if they moved fast enough. Every step would hurt. Every mile would bleed them dry. But Marcus felt something fierce and unbreakable ignite within him. He would not let his brother die here. Not today. Marcus forced his legs to move despite the pain radiating through every frozen nerve. The snow beneath his boots was darkened with Voryx's blood, each paw print behind them leaving a trail that screamed vulnerability to any predator watching from the pines. The war bear limped forward with halting steps, massive shoulders heaving with each ragged breath. Frost clung to his blood-matted fur, the plasma wound along his chest still glowing faintly where burned tissue met scorched armor plating. Above them, the dawn sky burned with pale rose and gold, streaked by drifting clouds of ice crystals that caught the rising light like shards of shattered glass. Marcus kept one hand against Voryx's flank, steadying the bear's unsteady gait while scanning the ridgelines for movement. The Karlax hunters had fled, but fear could only hold them back so long before vengeance overcame caution. Voryx stumbled, his massive paw skidding across black ice hidden beneath fresh snow. Marcus darted forward, bracing his shoulder under the bear's armored chest. He felt the tremble in those enormous muscles, the warmth of Voryx's blood soaking through his sleeve. "Don't stop," Marcus rasped, his voice raw from tears, smoke and adrenaline. "Don't you dare give up on me." Voryx's head turned slightly, sapphire eyes dim but locked onto Marcus's face with unspoken understanding. The bear rumbled low in his chest, a sound that vibrated through Marcus's bones with comforting familiarity. Then he forced himself upright again, exhaling a plume of steaming breath as he resumed their climb toward the ridgeline. Hours passed in a blur of trudging steps, rifle raised, eyes scanning every snowdrift and frost-coated pine. Each time Voryx faltered, Marcus spoke to him. Sometimes he told him old training chants from his days at Luna Base. Sometimes he whispered memories of when they first hunted together, Marcus setting simple wire snares for sulfur hares while Voryx lay hidden beneath snowbanks, only his glowing eyes visible as he waited for prey to approach. He spoke until his throat ached from cold and grief. At midday, storm clouds massed on the northern horizon, dark purple boiling with electric veins. Lightning flickered silently through the roiling mass, illuminating distant mountain spires and stuttering flashes. Marcus quickened their pace. The outpost lay beyond those peaks, nestled in geothermal caverns that would mask them from Karlax drones. If they could reach it before the storm hit, Voryx would have a chance. They crested a narrow ridge overlooking a glacial basin, the wind screaming between jagged black stones. Marcus paused, squinting through his cracked visor as he scanned the basin floor below. The half-buried silhouette of a human comms relay tower protruded from the snow like a rusting needle. Relief surged through his chest, setting his knees trembling with exhausted hope. "We're close," he whispered to Voryx, gripping a fistful of the bear's thick fur. "Just hold on a little longer." Voryx leaned into him with the gentlest pressure, a fleeting gesture of trust before he began his descent down the steep ridge. Blood left dark trails behind his paws, staining the pristine snow with each step. Halfway down, his legs buckled. Marcus dropped to his knees beside him, wrapping both arms around the bear's massive neck as the war bear wheezed with pain, steam curling from his nostrils in ragged gasps. "Get up," Marcus said, his voice breaking. "Please. I can't carry you. I need you to stand." Voryx's head sagged, muzzle brushing Marcus's armored chest. His sapphire eyes flickered, dim and unfocused. A low whine rumbled from his throat, pitiful in its softness for such a colossal creature. Marcus felt something crack inside his chest, a shattering that left only raw, desperate fury behind. He slammed his fist against the bear's armored shoulder plate. "Get up," he roared. "You're Voryx, the war bear of Voryx Prime. You tore Karlax hunters limb from limb. You are not allowed to die here, do you hear me? Not when we're this close." Voryx's eyes focused, narrowing slightly as a thin stream of steam exhaled from his snout. Muscles bunched beneath Marcus's grip, vibrating with suppressed effort. With a guttural snarl that rose into a low roar, Voryx heaved himself upright, claws digging deep furrows into the ice as he forced his massive body to stand again. "That's it," Marcus said, tears freezing on his cheeks as he rose beside him. "That's my brother." They continued down the ridge together. As they reached the comms tower's base, Marcus activated his emergency beacon, hoping the outpost was monitoring old frequencies. Static hissed in his ear for agonizing seconds before a voice crackled through his helmet comm. "Unknown unit, identify. This is Outpost Vega." Marcus nearly collapsed with relief. "This is Sergeant Marcus Kane, Recon Team Delta, requesting immediate medical evac. I'm with an allied asset in critical condition. Repeat, critical condition." "Confirmed, Sergeant." "Sit tight, VTOL inbound in 20 minutes." Hold position. Vorax slumped to his haunches beside the comms tower, steam rising from his blood-soaked fur. Marcus rested his head against the bear's broad armored flank, listening to his labored breathing. The wind howled around them, carrying flecks of ice that stung Marcus's exposed face. Above, thunder rolled across the darkening sky, promising the storm would arrive long before rescue. Marcus pressed his palm against Vorax's snout, feeling the bear's hot breath wash over his skin. "Stay awake," he whispered. "Tell me you're going to see Luna Base. Tell me you want to taste fresh salmon from Earth's oceans." Vorax's dim eyes flickered, focusing on Marcus's face with aching tenderness. The bear rumbled softly, a faint echo of the thunder above, then leaned his massive head into Marcus's chest with a sigh. Lightning tore across the sky, illuminating the basin in harsh white light. In the distance, the rising whine of VTOL engines reached Marcus's ears, still faint but drawing closer. Relief and terror warred within him. They were almost saved. Almost. Vorax trembled violently, his breathing hitching in sharp, shallow gasps. Marcus pressed his forehead against the bear's armored brow, tears dripping onto blood-matted fur. "You're not allowed to leave me," he whispered. "Not now. Not after everything." The bear's massive chest heaved once, twice, then stilled for a long moment. Marcus felt panic rise in his throat like bile. But Vorax drew in another rattling breath, eyes fluttering open with fading sapphire light. He turned his head slightly, pressing his snout against Marcus's chest with the faintest rumble, a final whisper of trust and devotion. VTOL thrusters roared overhead, kicking up a cyclone of snow and ice shards that tore at Marcus's hair and exposed skin. Figures in black thermal armor descended on cables, weapons ready. One of them knelt beside Marcus, her helmet scanning the war bear with flickering hollow readouts. "Jesus Christ," she breathed. "What the hell is this thing?" Marcus didn't look at her. His eyes stayed locked on Vorax's dimming gaze. He's my brother. Help him. Please." The medic hesitated only a moment before gesturing to her team. "Get plasma stabilizers on the wound now. Prep the lift harness, we're taking both of them up." As hands reached for him, Marcus pressed his forehead one last time against Vorax's. "You hear that?" he whispered through cracked lips. "You're going home." Vorax exhaled a soft, rumbling breath that rattled in his chest. His massive eyes closed slowly as darkness claimed him, but his body remained warm beneath Marcus's touch, even as the VTOL's winch cable tightened around them both. They rose together into the storm-churned sky, wind screaming past them, ice stinging Marcus's cheeks like glass needles. Below, the basin receded into swirling whiteness. Marcus tightened his arms around Vorax's armored neck, refusing to let go even as medics reached out to pull him aboard the hovering craft. He felt the war bear's chest rise faintly one last time against his ribs, a final echo of life and loyalty that burned itself into his soul forever. Marcus lifted his gaze to the storm-torn horizon, eyes burning with exhausted triumph as dawn fire spread across distant peaks beyond the roiling clouds. For the first time in weeks, he allowed himself to believe they had survived. In that silent moment, high above the frozen death world, Sergeant Marcus Kane understood one immutable truth. In a galaxy full of hunters, there would always be prey. But on this day and every day after, the galaxy would remember the human and his war bear, the hunted who refused to kneel.